Hey everybody, how's it going? Dan Shinder here on Drum Talk TV with my co-host Jason Gianni with our show A Tribute to the Tributes, and we have two special guests with us today. We have Wallis and Ronnie Negro, the dual drummers from the tribute band SoulShine, which is a tribute to the Allman Brothers. Tell us where you're watching from, folks. I'll be looking over here for questions, comments, chime in. We'll give some shout outs. I'm coming to you from Globe, Arizona, 100 miles east of Phoenix up in the mountains. Jason, my partner, is in New Jersey. Rob is in New Jersey. And Ron is uptown in Manhattan. What's up, boys?
Yo!
Excited about this. This is the first time. Yeah, this is the first time ever I've had two drummers on as guests to talk about not only the project they work on, but double drumming. So let's start with this. Jason brought, it's funny, even though I knew Rob was in this band, Jason's the one that brought this to my attention. So I want to ask Jason, as my co-host, fellow drummer, of course, and music lover, what was the first thing that caught your ear, Jason, about wanting to have the band featured on our show, A Tribute to the Tributes?
Well, the first thing is that Ron and I have been playing in a lot of projects together. We've been sharing a lot of projects together, and he brought up the idea of bringing SoulShine to this to our party here, based on the fact that it was an established tribute act, and we had spoken about a couple other projects he was playing with as well. But the fact that Rob was involved, and I've known Rob for so long, I was like, well, this is a drop in the bucket, man. You know, shooting a hoop. So we definitely wanted this to happen. And outside of them being so great and such great musicians, just the camaraderie between all of us was just a no-brainer. So this is perfect.
Yeah, that's great. And Rob and Ron, have you both, I don't remember from the bio, have you both been in the band about the same amount of time, or who came when, and how has your drumming relationship evolved? And then we'll get into double drumming, and we'll talk about the band itself as well.
You answer, Ronnie.
You're muted, I think.
Muted. Ronnie, you're muted, buddy.
Oh. Is that true?
There you go.
There you go.
Okay. So Rob and I, we played in the same circle in Westchester. So we knew each other, but kind of from afar. And Rob is actually the one that approached me about doing an Allman Brothers night, because my band Powderfinger actually makes up half of SoulShine. Me, the one of the guitar players, and the bass player. We did an impromptu tribute to Butch Trucks after he passed away, and then Rob was invited, and the tribute that we did to Butch, we just set up a second kit, and we just had I invited a lot of drummers to come up and play.
Oh, cool.
But Rob couldn't make it, and he actually said, "Hey, can we do a whole night?" And I was definitely down, and my band was on board, and the other two people came on board. We didn't even have to discuss it too much. It was very easy to figure out who should round this band out. So Rob really got the ball rolling.
That's cool. Wow. And so, Rob, how long were you in the band? Because were you in the band before Ron, or did you both bring it together at the same time?
We just had the idea, right, Rob, just to do it for like a one-off, kind of labor of love. It wasn't like, hey, let's start a tribute band. And like I said, Robin asked me to do it. I was excited about it. My band was excited about it. The other players that we asked were excited about it. We learned 20-something songs and got a rehearsal going. And as soon as we played, Rob, you take it from there.
Yeah, it all happened very organically, and it was like Ronnie said, meant to be a one night, one off. Just I used to play that music a long time ago, mostly in my parents' basement when I was a kid, and I've always been a big fan. I especially love Greg and his songwriting, singing, arranging, and his solo work, and obviously Dwayne and the whole band. And I've been fortunate enough over the years to have gotten pretty friendly with JMO. So, I would usually get invited down to, one night at the Beacon, so I got to see them play, many times from, an incredible vantage point, basically, in a folding chair, sitting next to JMO.
Wow.
But so that even, made it even more sort of exciting for me because I felt like I was sort of in the band, and it was a big tease really because I couldn't play, but I was like sitting right.
Oh, wow.
On stool,
Yeah, right there.
I was really disappointed that I couldn't do that one, kind of sitting in thing that Ronnie mentioned, a tribute to Butch. And what we did is everybody agreed we do one gig. We pick a set list. Everyone sheds the tunes themselves. Ronnie and I never even discuss, well, like, you do this, I'll do this. And, maybe we'll come back into that. It was just sort of organic. And one of the guitar players has a rehearsal studio. And, we went in for the one rehearsal that we agreed everybody would do before, 2 or 3 days before. And after the first tune, we all sort of, I can just picture it. I like put my sticks down on the snare drum and looked around, and it was like, wow, that was really something, that one tune. It was like, and everyone was just sort of scratching their heads saying, hell just happened, and it was just an organic, I've been playing, music for a very, since I'm, 10 or 12, my first band, I think I was 12, right? So, it was like 20 years ago. But
I mean, yeah.
It just felt so good. And so we, everybody was supercharged. We did the gig. It was a small club. The place was packed. There was a real big energy that night. People were blown away. The club said, oh, you got to do this again. I think we did it 6 weeks later, rehearsed one more time, added a couple of tunes. And it just organically went from there. I'm sorry to be hogging all the time,
No, that's okay. It's great when that happens, when everyone's on the same wavelength. And I'm getting a weird error message, so I just want to make sure that the show is playing. Chime in, folks. Let us know how the audio is and how it looks and where you're watching from. I'm in Globe. Everyone else is in the New York area. Ronnie's in Manhattan. Jason and Robert in New Jersey. I want to show a clip. Let's give everybody a taste. And this clip was shot from the audience. So Rob's kind of covered up, but listen to the music, watch the video for a bit. I'm going to skate through it because there's 3 songs here. And then we'll talk about the whole aspect of double drumming. Check this out.
It's probably playing on the
Through the video a bit. And we'll give a taste of one more song. God, that sounds just like it. There's a little taste, folks. We'll show more towards the end of the show. The singer is great, and the organ is like as if I wasn't watching, I would say, oh, that's sampled. It's that close. It sounds amazing. But let's talk about the double drumming. There's a lot of music fans and people who are not musicians, well, even musicians and even drummers who say, what's up with 2 drummers? Like, why do you need two drummers? Why don't you explain what it's like you two playing together and what you've learned from examining and emulating the Allman Brothers music with two drummers?
Go ahead, Ron.
You go first, because I think it'd be cool if you actually, said the things you saw of sitting next to JMO. The things you saw like with your own eyes.
Of how those two work together.
Yeah.
Good. Interesting point. I never really thought about this. As Ronnie will mention, it was all really organic. We never talked about. The only thing we talked about was the song selection, and then the guitar players. They rehearsed a little bit on their own to go over like the harmonies and all that stuff, and there was some vocal rehearsals eventually. But when I would sit there and watch JMO play, Butch was more between the two guys, sort of the meat and potato guys, I would say. He kind of drove the bus, not 100%, but certainly a little over half. I would credit Butch, and JMO to me did a lot of coloring, and JMO and his background, at his love of jazz and New Orleans drumming, and he lived in New Orleans for a long time. Knew a bunch of New Orleans musicians, and he really came at that band from a more of an R&B, sort of jazz side. Yeah. And I think Butch was more of a sort of 2 and 4, meat and potatoes guy.
More foundational, right?
Yeah, and sitting. Sort of right behind JMO, I would see, there were times when he was, obviously keeping time with whatever he was doing, but it was more color than sort of the heart of the pulse, I would say. Mm-hmm. And so I try to absorb a little bit of that, because it related to me more as a player too. I've got a pretty steeped, jazz. I've not that I played a lot of jazz, but I've listened and worked with many jazz drummers and got to see a lot of this stuff firsthand. So, it connected. And again, we started playing these tunes, and it just sort of fell into a quote groove, that was strong. And I don't think there's ever, this is like 3 years ago. We're probably 3 years into the band at this point. We've started doing theaters over the last year, whole bunch of shows all over the Northeast planned this summer that obviously, like everyone else, went belly up because of COVID. That we had, some outdoor shows with, they were talking about, 3,000 to 5,000 people in some of these shows. So, unfortunately, it didn't happen, and hopefully it'll happen, this coming year as soon as things get really, swinging again. Right. But coming back to the question, I'd like to hear Ronnie's take, and then we could talk maybe a little bit more specific about some drumming type things.
Yeah. How did you, like you mentioned, Ronnie, both of you mentioned how organic the first experience was, but over time, in these 3 years, do you exercise who's going to do what type of thing? Do you trade off foundational versus color? Are you playing the same thing a lot of the time? Help us understand, but also non-drummers and people who have never done the double drumming thing, how it's not only fun, but what it does to the music.
You're muted again.
Like Rob.
No, you're good. You cut out.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, like Rob said, nothing really was discussed. I mean, if I had to say, and Rob would probably agree, I'm probably Butch and Rob is JMO. But that would even be probably 75-25. And it just never had to be discussed. There are a lot of Allman Brothers songs that have percussion. So maybe it'll be more important, that one guy's, maybe taking his snares off and, and playing more of a timbali or a conga-ish kind of part. Shakers, sticks with tambourines on them to really fill it up. But we already have a lot filled up, a 6-piece band with 2 drummers. Yeah. The important thing with another drummer is to have that yin yang effect. You definitely can both fill at the same time, but you don't necessarily want to do like the same length fill, and you just start to get the sense of who's going to, like if you start to hear someone do that, 2-beat fill, you're just like, you're going to have that choice to either I'll jump on beat 4 and fill the tail end of it, or I won't do anything, and it just feels like, well, where are we in the music?
Right.
Because there's a ton of improv, in these songs. Some, have no words at all. So you have to kind of pace yourself. You can't be a kid in a candy store. Some of these jams could go on and on. So you have to really be not only listening to, the rest of the band, but what's going on next to you, because you're going to have a lot of time to have, input. But you don't want to be the one that's dictating, the intensity or the volume or this. Let the soloist be the one that's taking you on that journey, and we just support, and just make sure that we give them that thing that they can fall back, but we're going to keep pushing. And it is absolutely bizarre how we don't talk about it, Rob. I don't even know how to describe that.
That's how you each just gravitated towards your own natural roles that happen to end up that
Totally.
way.
Yeah, even like where we set up on the stage. Like I set up on Butch's side. We didn't say, "Hey, should I?" I'm kind of Butch, that sounded pretty dumb.
But it just came out that way, right? Family show.
Just everything like fell into line exactly like that. From what we're going to play on what songs to how we're going to play within those songs. And
yeah, Ronnie, you brought up something before that I thought that I was going to bring up, but you brought it up ahead of time, which is my experience. I have a lot of experience for many, many years with Afro-Cuban music and playing an Afro-Cuban band. So the idea of the drum set player sort of being the last one in and playing off the percussion or finding your way in between the percussion parts, that sort of thing, is really important. I was going to ask you guys that if it was sort of like, do you ever think of that way? Like, hey, Rob's sort of playing the role of the percussionist at this point. I'm playing the role of the percussionist at this point. Or is it really just sort of two drum set players that kind of barge down together and just sort of weigh each other out depending on the song,
I'm going to say Rob has a very good handle on a lot of those Latin rhythms. Like sometimes it's kind of fun to just look over and see what he's doing, because it doesn't have to be the same thing every single night, like as long as he's staying within a certain parameter.
Right. They needed to do it like that, so why not?
Right. And so Rob maybe fell into that JMO role a little bit more because of a bit more of a jazz background than me. I'm someone who can play some jazz, but I would never call myself a jazz drummer. I could play a little Latin, but I would never call myself a Latin drummer. I'm a rock drummer first. So maybe our different schools from where we came from just made the roles a little more clear.
And they complement each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you, Ronnie, a Allman Brothers fan before, or is this something that was the spark for you to take a dive into their music and the styles?
Very much an Allman Brothers fan, but not in my very formative years. I was more like the rock guy, Van Halen, that kind of thing.
Eddie.
The older rockers like, Zeppelin, guys that weren't even around when I started playing in the mid 80s. But my first working band, my first audition for my first working band, who Bob Getz, the bass player in SoulShine, was on that audition for my first working band when I was 18. The first song I had to learn was One Way Out by the Allman Brothers, and I didn't know that there were two drummers in the Allman Brothers, so I was like, how do I play this? There's a lot going on. YouTube, there was no way to find out. So
I basically reproduced these overdubs.
Yeah, so I just went into that audition playing the simplest thing I could that could get through the tune, and then that was like it. Like then once I got in that band, we did some Allman Brothers songs. Then next thing I know, Greg Allman was coming to town, like with B.B. King in late '87, I think it was, and I went to go see him, and I was like, I want to listen to all these songs now, and so I went in really really fast, starting like in my late teens. Saw the Allman Brothers. a bunch of times, even some impromptu, like front row, just, all my friends, we all scalped, and somehow I got a last minute $30 ticket and the Beacon. I'm looking up in there. I said, yeah, I'll find you guys, later on in the show. And then I just keep walking forward, and I'm like right in front of Greg. I'm like, no, I'll see you at the end of the show. I'm going to stay right here.
Great.
So yeah, I did become a very, very big Allman Brothers fan. And on the days that you just don't know what to practice, I would just put on Live at the Fillmore and just play from beginning to end. And that's where I cut my teeth with improvisational playing.
But that leads me to the next question. Rob mentioned, the improvisational aspect of the music, of course. When I was in a Zeppelin band, long before we called them tribute bands or cover bands, this is in the late 70s, we did a 3-hour show. The guitar player had all the same guitars as Jimmy, the violin bow, I had the timpani drums. I mean, we really did it. And we listened, we were all familiar with many years of bootlegs. So when we were going to do a show and do a set list, we'd have to clarify, what tour is that from? Is that the Song Remains the Same soundtrack tour, or are we talking 1977, where the Song Remains the Same and the Sick Again and the Rover? What's the deal here? And with your band, with SoulShine, have you learned, is it the Live at the Fillmore show, or is it reproducing stuff from the studio albums, the studio versions? Have you taken the dive into the bootlegs? And then do you tell the audience anything about those different iterations of different tours and whatnot? Like how does the band operate in that manner musically?
You take that.
Sure. So a song like, let's say Jessica, that's a song where we will just play it exactly like the record. I mean, Chris, our keyboard player, plays that piano solo note for note. Norman Dodge on guitar, God bless, he painstakingly learned Dickie Betts' solo note for note. He plays it that way every night. Jeff, our other guitar player, is the slide player. He knows, he's steeped in that kind of playing. So certain songs you just need to do the album version, and then it's really the stuff from the Fillmore. Getting back to that album, like Memory of Elizabeth Reed and Whipping Post, where we're just gonna go. We just put our seatbelts on and we go. But a song like Melissa, maybe we'll extend the end a little bit. But for the most part, I think the only live thing we ever kind of touch on would be the Fillmore. But again, not really trying to steal the licks necessarily, because they probably played it different that next night. But that structure, how long they'll go, maybe the peaks and valleys and stuff like that. But that's I think the best way I can answer it. Rob, can you elaborate?
Yeah. I mean, really, from the beginning, everybody, without speaking about it, again, organically, everybody was there in that first rehearsal and doing that first one-off gig that was 3 years ago, was there to honor the music. So, we didn't want to mess with the molecules too much. It's like, you're looking at Mona Lisa, like, what are you going to do? Give her a mustache? It's like, when, if you're of that mindset that you think some of that music was just so well done, why mess with it? And we really tried to, we try to give it all of our integrity to reproduce it. And people say, oh, it's not creative. It's not, this, it's not that. Sometimes when the audience and the band is like on a roller coaster and that stuff is, you're like, 2 hours into an hour and a half into the set and everyone's sweating and the audience is like getting exhausted from dancing. And there's just this thing that happens that is, that to me, it's like becomes kind of a surreal, I get like this out of body thing where I step back the audience and the guys in the band. And it's like, it's like a subway car coming at you, really, it's very powerful feeling emotionally, egotistically,
I can see how it all comes together as one, the band members, the music, the audience. and everything just becomes like one. It's one experience together. It's not an us and them thing.
Absolutely, and for me, I'm the elder of the band. So half the show I'm sitting there thinking, I can't believe I'm this lucky to be able to be playing this music that I love with these guys who I adore.
That's cool.
And I'm getting paid for this, and we're playing places that are packed with people, and so there's a really great energy, and it's the energy that really at the end of the day, when I get packed up and start driving home, like I'm so amped up, and a lot of times I'm driving 2 hours or 3. Some of the gigs I was
wow.
Really, I'll drive home at night. I could sleep over somewhere, but it's like I just need to unwind. I need that
to come down from it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
it's an adrenaline rush, for me. But I want to touch. I don't want to. I know we're a little limited on time.
We're good.
I would love to do this all day.
Yeah, me too. I know we can talk about all of it.
Two things I'd like to touch on. Maybe if you don't mind, Dan, if I could raise it now. Pete, when there's a term, and maybe younger musicians or certain players don't know. When you hear it's like play for the song.
Yeah.
What does that phrase mean? And I would love to hear your guys' opinions, because you're all players, too. But to me, it's supporting. The main thing for me, especially in songs with lyrics, is supporting the lyric. Knowing where you want to get up a notch and then another notch, or where the singer's going for, like if it's an emotional thing, or if it's a ballad, like where you really build it so that the audience sort of feels it in their heart, like where they're supposed to.
Yeah.
I just thought we could briefly touch on that, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on what it means for playing for the song.
Sure, I'll go last because I've got a weird take on that. I think I talked about it a little bit with Robin Flans on that interview about Jeff Picard.
Ronnie, why don't you go, and then I'll go. Go ahead, Ron.
So yeah, like I was saying before, this music really does, for a drummer, present you with like a tremendous amount of opportunity. It's not 3.5 minute pop tunes where you're just kind of filling to go into choruses and stuff like that. You have a lot of spots where you're gonna really get to stretch out, and you have like if you feel like the guy next to you, Rob, is really like holding it down, then you could even say, I'm going to go out a little further than I normally would, because that's where the soloist is, or vice versa. I'll hold it down because I feel Rob supporting the soloist and taking things to another level. And sometimes we do it together, which that's in its own way, just this there's no solid 2 and 4 going on, but it's this big kinetic ball of energy. So you definitely have to pace yourself. And then there are a couple of songs in the set where they're kind of placed in the set, like SoulShine, the song SoulShine. That's usually like in the midpoint of the second set, and it's a nice calm down song. It's a very slow tune. Whether Rob knows this or not, I actually start to say to myself, I'm not filling in this song. Maybe I get caught up in like in the bridge somewhere, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just down for grooving on this tune.
That's cool.
It feels good to go back to this.
Too.
It is. And then let everything else go on around me. The players are so good. It almost just at that moment just lets me sit back, catch my breath, and just play for the song. That song is not a rock'em sock'em, knock it out of the park drum song as it is. So I am a song player first. In other musical situations, I love not overplaying.
That's great. Thanks. Jason, what's your take on the whole concept of playing for the song?
I'm going to bring up a topic after this that is the idea of tribute bands versus original bands, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, the takeaway, or the leave behind, whatever you want to call it. But I think one of the things that comes up in this topic is you're trying to sort of pay homage to something that was created that you're not creating. that somebody else has created. And I think you have to play for the song, and you have to play for the message of the song and the makeup of the band. Ronnie and I both played in the Ultimate with Mark Martel, with the Queen guys. And, Mark's voice is everything about that. And if you're not bringing out Mark the most, well, then the purpose of what you're doing is not working. And I think in the case of original music, when it's your own thing, you certainly still want to play for the song, but you also want to put a little bit of your stamp on it, a little bit of your own personality into it. Sometimes in these type of gigs, you really don't have that opportunity. You want to really just bring the song out as much as possible. But I will say, with the Allman Brothers type band or any sort of jammier bands, you do have a little space to spread out. So you guys have a very interesting scenario going on where you have to play for the song, but you also have that opportunity. So it's like you're kind of running that fine line there, between getting a little too far away or also going a little bit too much simple, where it's not serving the purpose of the Allman Brothers too. So I give you guys credit for doing that. That's great.
I have like I said, kind of a strange take. And first of all, I agree with all three of you. And at the same time, which doesn't contradict me agreeing with you, I have a problem with a lot of people translating playing for the song, meaning the drummer has to lay back. That's not, to me, that is not what it means. I'm going to give you some examples. Neil Peart, La Villa Strangiato, he played for the song. Neil Peart, Cygnus X1, he played for the song. Any drummer that played any Frank Zappa music played for the song. John Bonham, Achilles' Last Stand, played for the song. And if you think of if you folks know what these songs are, or, there's Barrymore Barlow, Minstrel in the Gallery by Jethro Tull. There's just so many examples where the drummer is not laying back or just playing four on the floor, but they are indeed playing for the song. Carl Palmer, Phil Collins, Alan White, Bill Bruford. So that's, to me, playing for the song means, for a drummer, and really any musician, but from a drummer standpoint, playing for the song means the drummer really understands their place in that composition, and that doesn't always mean leaving a bunch of space and playing like Phil Rudd or Nick Mason. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, what I was describing was more of a vocal-oriented type of music, where I feel certainly as the drummer, and I think for the whole band, you're there to support the vocal and convey the emotion of that vocal.
Absolutely.
Instrumental music, it's different, and like Ronnie was saying, with the Allmans, and you were saying, Dan, that we have a mix of both worlds because we get to stretch on some of these 15-minute sort of jams.
Yeah.
And but we also are there to support a tune like SoulShine, which it was interesting, Ronnie. I just thought you were getting tired, and you were just sort of.
Oh, I admitted I was. Yes. Yes, I totally admit I'm tired by that point. We probably had that probably usually comes like right on the heels of, in the memory of Elizabeth Reed. I'm definitely tired.
That's funny. Hey, Jason, before you bring up, what does it really mean to be a great tribute band, and what is the takeaway other musicians can learn from that whole process of emulation, let me play another clip by the guys so that we have that as context. Let's pop back into Jessica right here. that, let's jump back a touch. Those who missed something earlier. In this song, folks. I love the multimedia, by the way, going on at the same time. Guys are so together. Jason, before we go, a couple quick shout outs. We have Lars Stahlberg from Sweden watching. How's it going, Lars? Someone near you guys with Jersey Shore. Anthony Koskina, how you doing? Thanks for chiming in. And Brian Cahoon, who seems to never miss a broadcast, no matter when it's on. Sometimes I'll even test some stuff out or be bored. Midnight 30 here in Arizona, Brian's there. Thanks, Brian. She's from Nepal is usually always with us. Hey, thanks everybody. See the Cindy Goldberg, Gregor Houston, and Logan Ellis Shepard, an awesome young up-and-coming drummer who, by the way, side note, just submitted a Hudson play-along to me that we'll be featuring. So we'll get to that. Rob, you and I are going to have to do a whole other separate interview soon just to talk about the play-alongs and the value of that. Hudson, for you folks who don't know, has a great new catalog of multi-genre play-alongs. Are awesome, and we've been gathering all kinds of great players that are going to demonstrate. But anyways, Jason, move us into why playing a tribute band, and what's the takeaway for musicians? What can we learn from emulating our favorites where that might not be creative? What is the other value to it? Because there's many.
Well, I'm actually going to ask these gentlemen that, and I'll start with the idea that Dan and I talk about this from show to show, that we did not pick up our drumsticks years ago with a goal in mind of saying, hey, we're going to end up in a tribute band. That's going to be our ultimate goal. We wanted to be on stage, on the big stage, influencing other people the way our idols influenced us. But based on the fact that the business has changed so much, and as you guys know, I don't have to explain that to you, and the idea of the role-playing band or the tribute band, we're not talking just cover bands here. We're talking about the bigger type of bands that we're in, the tribute bands. They really give the drummer and the musicians an opportunity, not just opportunities in general to play, but the exposure in front of big name artists, sometimes on the stage with some of those big name artists, exposure to the companies for endorsements and being in the business and that sort of thing. For you guys, talk about that. I mean, you've gotten to the point where you are playing big theaters now. You are making names. You are turning some heads. Is that something you guys have thought about as far as, wow, this is really a great opportunity to work? Or is there still that rub there between, like, I want to be in the original band. I never really wanted to be in the tribute band. What are your thoughts to that?
Ronnie?
No audio?
Yeah,
As far as the tribute band, that's something that Joe Bergamini, who you guys know well, he recommended me to substitute in an Eagles tribute band called Eaglemania about 4 years ago. So that, I've always been in cover bands, but that was like my exposure to now being in a band that just really wanted to perfectly replicate these tunes. And that pressure of really just, like you're going to be exposed because especially as a sub, they know they've gone through the tunes. They know how they're supposed to sound. So you have to do the homework. And I loved it. I always try to play cover band songs the way the record goes. That's why people want to hear those songs. So the tribute thing is that, like, it's that on steroids. You're doing one band, and now you really get to steep in that drummer style. You start to pick up so many nuances, and the more drummers you can do that for, the more cover songs that you learn the way they really go. I feel personally that it just makes you like it's a stew. You're going to have certain things to become the drummer that you are. You're going to have big hunks of, cups of this guy and a splash of this guy, a pinch of this guy, and it makes you uniquely you. So I've loved that I've played, covers, as much as I have, and now to do it on the higher level with these great tribute bands like the Ultimate Queen Celebration, like Eaglemania, a Pink Floyd band called Dark Side of the Wall, and SoulShine. I literally like Jason said, when you have someone like Mark Martel or something, these bands do it at such a level. I just get to sit back and honestly pretend I'm in those bands. I do. Like everything lines up to make it easy to pretend. The lights are there, the people are there, the sound is, ungodly, compared to just like a rehearsal room. Yeah. Like it's definitely something that I embrace wholly.
That's cool. Rob?
It's funny. It's probably 6-7 years ago. I was having dinner with Steve Smith one night in the city, and I don't remember exactly how we got to the conversation, but I can so clearly hear him saying, he said, at that point, he said, I just think, I guess we were talking about the business and tours and club gigs. And, Steve is on some, covers so many levels, from schlepping his own drums to a club gig to 30,000 with Journey, But he said to me at that point, he said, I think tribute bands are going to get bigger and bigger. And, I kind of looked at him. It didn't really. This was, way before SoulShine. It was literally 6 or 7 years ago, and it was a really interesting. I got to ask him about that. I never forgot him saying that, and it's not really answering your question, but it was just an interesting comment from Steve, someone like Steve. Not that he's doing, tribute bands. He is the tribute.
Right.
But
Interesting.
I think if you really love the music, people should go for it. I don't know that it's something that works if you get to do it a lot. And if you're not really into the music and you're sort of doing it because it's just another gig, I think it has a different meaning than it does really sit there and night after night and can just say, man, this is a blast that I'm getting to play this music, So, and that's the way I approach it. I never think about, I've done other types of gigs and, over the years, originals, bands, and, a lot of studio recordings and whatever. I mean, I'm sort of past that, I'm not going to have be in a number one record. Not that I know of in the imminent future, maybe in 10 or 20 years, but now, and so for me, it's just, I'm enjoying the ride. And every time we play, it's like, I feel like I'm living on, it's like bonus time, I can't believe that, we're doing this, 3 years in to really what was going to be a one night, fun night.
That's hilarious. So, what, thank you both for that. And what Ronnie said really absolutely resonates with my philosophy of the takeaway of the experiences that you're having and creating. When you talk about really diving into the nuances of a drummer's playing, it's exactly the same way as any other language. And this goes for not just drummers, but bass players, guitar players, accordion players, banjo players, juice harp players, anything, it doesn't matter. There's a difference between speaking a language and nailing the dialect. And when you can nail the dialect of the drummer that you're emulating or the guitar player, you are learning something and you're acquiring new skills to your art. And I think that is very overlooked by a lot of musicians, which is why if we go to a pub or go somewhere and see a cover band, they'll play 4 songs in a row that might be Aerosmith, AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, and Bad Company, and they all sound the same. Yeah. It should not sound like the same band is playing those 4 songs. It should sound like those bands are playing. And before anyone freaks out and says, well, they're not those bands. No kidding. But my point is, when you get Jimmy's guitar sound down as opposed to Mick Ralph's or anybody else, Jimi Hendrix for that matter, Stevie Ray Vaughan, George Thorogood, they're all different sounds. If you're going to have a set list that has a mix of different songs, they should sound different from each other. They shouldn't sound like the four people that have been playing all night. That's my take on it. And Ronnie, I think what you said speaks exactly to that. And that's my favorite takeaway of diving into someone's catalog and really learning what went on there. It's not about putting the beat in the place. That's part of it, but it's about what's the nuance. Is there a ghost note? Is there a drag? How hard was he or she hitting the snare? How is the snare tuned? Is it a big fat sound? Is it a Bill Bruford sound? Is it, there's all those things that make up that painting, if you will,
I just, I wanted to say one thing because I know we're just about out of time. And I had never done, a gig with a second drummer, and very rarely have had a chance to do gigs with percussion even.
Oh.
And so I just wanted to say, for anyone that maybe is out there thinking about doing it or doing it or trying to figure out how come it's maybe not working the way they thought it would or should, I just wanted to touch on the musical part of it for a second. And I love your guys' feedback from your experiences. But to me, it's all about, sort of feeling the time in the same place with two drummers and playing with, overly sensitive to dynamics.
Yeah.
And leaving the space and, having fun with it. There were nights where, Ronnie he'll with a flick of his finger, he'll like give me one of these. So I know, okay, that's this, I'm going to do that, Phil, the next 4 bars. And then I'll do like one of these, like to Ronnie. And he'll Phil,
the big noses, so we could just kind of like, shoot our nose the other way. You can't miss it.
Or you could do the John Lord. Bless John Lord, what a musical genius he was. John Lord would direct the band right from the Hammond organ. He'd hold up 2 fingers, 2 more. I watched this video of him jamming with Rick Wakeman in a band, and John takes both hands off the organ. He's holding up 7 fingers real quick, like directing. I love that kind of stuff. So you don't have to be so subtle about it.
And have fun with it, but I think it begs real sensitivity to dynamics to make the songs work in a set. Like, 1 or 2 songs is one thing, but to make it really work as a cohesive, we do sets that are often, at least an hour, if they're not, 90 minutes sometimes, for a set. Yeah. So, it's got to have a trajectory, like Ronnie was saying, you build the set so that, in the middle, maybe it's a mellower tune, gives everyone a chance for their ears to air out and kind of, chill out for a minute, and then you build it back up again to get to the end of the set. But those are the things I think that, younger drummers maybe aren't connecting on. They could think about those things because it's so much fun when it works. That's the main thing. It really is fun.
Yeah.
And it takes the pressure off. You don't have to be thinking every bar, every phrase of making sure you're conveying a certain drive. It can be shared and like before, the parts, if they work together nicely, they can be subtle but together create a really strong drive.
Yeah, and be complementary is definitely part of it whenever you play with a drummer and percussionist or 2 drummers together. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Jason, any closing words?
Yeah, I actually have one quick question, and maybe you guys could take a second to answer this. The stamp of approval, I find that is the thing, right?
Yeah.
The thing that everybody kind of looks for in this situation is some sort of recognition or whatever sponsorship or something from the band itself. Now, we know that some people in the Allman Brothers have passed away, unfortunately, but especially with all the people that Rob, and how you've kind of come into this, has there been any recognition from anyone in their camp at all for what you guys are doing? The guy, unfortunately, fortunately he's still alive, but he's the only one. Is Jay, and we just haven't had.
I guess I haven't had the courage. I've called him once or twice. I haven't talked to him in a number of years since the brothers, stopped playing.
Right.
I keep kind of saying I got to call him. We've done some gigs up in Connecticut, and I knew they weren't that far from where he lived. And I thought about, maybe we send a car and get him to come up or something. And I just haven't done it yet. Maybe I'm nervous, or I don't know why. I don't like to sort of try to force something. If it's, I wouldn't want to put my friendship with him, like to make him feel pressured, like, oh,
Sure.
yeah, I can't say no, that kind of thing. So no, the answer, Jason, is no. No one from their camp. J-Mo's drum tech, who's also known as Little J-Mo, Jamo, is a good friend, and he's seen some of our clips. He lives out in the Midwest, so he's not around to come down to a gig, and I'm sure he would if we were playing out in his neck of the woods. But he's been keeping an eye on what we're doing, and whenever clips get posted and stuff, he'll send me messages and things like that. But that's about it.
Okay.
Cool. I'm gonna before we close out, I have an interesting question from where did it go? Oh, from Steve Ford from the audience.
Hi, Steve.
Interesting question. I'm going to read it off. I'd like, for now, everyone to just give a yes or no answer, only because we're so short on time. I want to make sure this fits on Instagram. Thanks, everyone else, for chiming in. Brian Cohoon has an interesting question about Allman Brothers Band tribute in a geographical location. Maybe you guys can look at that after the show and comment on that for him. So Steve says, seems that tribute bands are fueled by boomers or Xers, who are perhaps more passionate about the association they have with their music than some younger kids. Will tribute bands of today's music have the same draw to tribute bands? So say, what do you think? Like in 5-10 years, when people are doing tribute bands to music that's come out in the last 10 years of now, do you think they'll have the same draw, yes or no?
90 minutes. I think there's just too much, quick satisfaction. A single, people like kids, kids, drive the music business. They're very driven on just the single. Like a lot of times a kid can't name more than 2-3 songs from somebody. Just that, you wouldn't be able to fill like a 90-minute show and keep it interesting. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, Rob, what do you think?
I sort of say yes and no. I think there are certain bands that have, longevity, like a band like Foo Fighters.
Just going to say them. Yep.
Yeah. Good point.
Amazing music. He's got a long catalog. You take someone, I think the top of the heap in terms of a catalog and longevity is Springsteen's still writing great music. He has a new record coming out. He's 71. So I think certain bands can have that. But I think I agree with Ronnie. There's an awful lot of sort of, bands that come and go before they really establish a catalog, which is what you really need. A band like the Eagles or Pink Floyd or Zeppelin or the Allmans. It's the catalog that really makes it work.
Oh, that's a great take. Jason, before we have to go, what do you think?
I was going to say the same thing as Rob, is that it's all about the catalog, but also you got to keep in mind what the production of today's music is too. I mean, the majority of today's music doesn't even require live drums, and we had so many bands that were such, the musicians were so amazing at what they did that even us today, we're still trying to emulate what they did in the proper way. And going forward from now, we're dealing with stuff that we're going to have to continue to emulate from a drum machine or program perspective, Yeah. So between that mixed with a limited library, I don't even know how that would possibly happen on the grand scale. I think we're living in a good time right now for tribute bands. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's really interesting. After hearing all this, I don't know where I stand. So just real quickly before we go, until maybe only a couple years ago, I did not get the whole tribute band thing. Now, even though I played in that Zeppelin band, like I said, but that was 78, 79, 80, and 81. That was like the earth was still cooling. Things were different then. The reason I don't understand tribute bands, especially if the band is still around, I didn't get that. And then someone straightened me out and they said, well, a lot of people do live in areas where these bands won't come, or concert tickets because of production costs, fuel costs, all those things have gotten so expensive that this is the only way. And then I sort of thought back to my old days of when I used to do it, and it all kind of started to make sense. So moving forward, what a great question that was. Moving forward, I say yes, but maybe not as much as today's music. It is dependent on the catalog. That's a great take. And I see a lot of Gen X. I see millennials, Gen X, and Gen Y, and very young players playing music of the bands that Rob mentioned. Pink Floyd, Zeppelin. I mean, kids that are like 8 and 12 that are killing it. Anyways, we're out of time. I want to thank everybody for watching. If you tuned in even 1 minute after we started, be sure to watch the archive as soon as we're done here. This will be archived. It'll also be on YouTube, Vimeo, and Instagram. Rob and Ronnie, thank you so much for joining
Thank you,
Jason
guys.
and I and sharing your experience and wisdom.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Had a lot of fun. Hope you guys did too.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Thanks. Hang on the line as I disconnect. Bye, everybody. Thank you.